The 20th of August, 1947, Nuremberg, Germany. After more than 8 months on trial, 23 defendants, who during the Second World War either participated in a deadly Nazi euthanasia program, killing mentally ill or physically disabled people deemed unworthy of life, or who conducted painful and often deadly medical experiments on thousands of concentration camp inmates without their permission, hear their sentences read. Thanks to the gruesome testimonies of dozens of witnesses, the world finally learns the truth about the pseudo-medical experiments which violated medical ethics by both their means and their ends, and required the approval of the SS chief, Heinrich Himmler. One of those who performed these experiments is an Austrian physician, Wilhelm Beiglböck. Wilhelm Beiglböck was born on the 10th of October, 1905, in Hochneukirchen, then part of Austria-Hungary. Beiglböck studied medicine at the University of Vienna, and in 1932 he received his doctorate. On the following year, while working as an assistant at the Medical University Clinic in Vienna, Beiglböck joined the Nazi Party. As with many Austrian Nazis, his main political goal was the annexation of Austria to the German Reich, which became reality in the spring of 1938. The Anschluss, as it became known, took place over 3 days between the 11th and 13th of March 1938 and was the Nazi German regime's first act of territorial aggression and expansion. In 1939, Beiglböck made his habilitation, and in 1940 he became a top doctor under Hans Eppinger, a respected Austrian physician known to have traveled to Moscow to treat Joseph Stalin in 1936, and a year later he was called to treat Queen Marie of Romania. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. During the war, a number of German physicians conducted painful and often deadly medical experiments on thousands of prisoners which centered around 3 topics: survival of military personnel, testing of drugs and treatments, and the advancement of Nazi racial and ideological goals. From May 1941, Beiglböck worked as a medical officer of the German Air Forces, the Luftwaffe. In May 1944, the Reich Ministry of Aviation discussed the potability of seawater in order to be able to rescue the German pilots who were drifting in the sea. Since the planned human experiments would be painful and life-threatening, concentration camp prisoners were used as test subjects. For this reason, 40 Roma and Sinti prisoners from the Buchenwald concentration camp were transported to Dachau. At first, for 10 days, all test subjects received full flight rations, which was 3,000 calories. After that, the groups were allowed to eat only the Luftwaffe's emergency rations, and the victims were divided into 3 groups. The first group received pure seawater. The second group received only chemically prepared seawater with reduced salt content, which was dark yellow in color, and the third group received salt water with a camouflaged freshwater taste. The experiment lasted 10 days and resulted in extreme thirst, convulsions, and delirium. Since seawater deprives the organisms of fluids, the prisoners felt very ill. Their bodies dried out, and kidneys, intestines, and liver failed. The inmates were so desperate to find a source of fresh water that they started to lick the freshly mopped floor. A Holocaust survivor named Josef Chofenich, who was responsible for using the X-ray machine in the infirmary, described how victims of the experiments had trouble eating and would desperately seek out any source of water, including an old floor rag. After the war, Karl Hellenreiner, a German Roma inmate who survived these experiments, recalled, "I had terrible thirst attacks, felt very ill, and lost a lot of weight. I finally got a fever and felt so weak that I could not stand up. I clearly remember a scene where a Czechoslovakian Roma man asked Wilhelm Beiglböck if he couldn't possibly drink any more water. This man was then tied to a bed by order of Beiglböck, who himself violently poured the lake water down this gypsy man using a stomach pump. During these experiments, most of the men received liver and spinal cord punctures. I myself had a liver puncture and know from my own experience that these punctures were terribly painful." Somewhere between the first and second week of the experiments, all inmates were carried out of the sick room into the yard on stretchers covered with white sheets. Here, their naked bodies were photographed, and shortly after the recordings, numbers were tattooed onto their chests. The surviving prisoners were subsequently used as forced laborers in armaments production. These experiments were conducted by Wilhelm Beiglböck and his colleague from Vienna, Hans Eppinger. 2 or 3 of the prisoners died as a result of these experiences, and the rest were severely weakened. In October 1944, Beiglböck presented the results of his experiments in a comprehensive report at a conference in Berlin. The result of these experiments was that the method of chemically processed seawater was useless. In the end, justice finally caught up with Beiglböck when he was arrested by the Allies and tried at the Nuremberg Doctors Trial. During the trial, one of Beiglböck's Roma subjects, previously mentioned Karl Hellenreiner, recognized in Beiglböck the man who had tortured him at Dachau, leaving him with poor health for the remainder of his life. Emotionally overwhelmed by the sight of his Nazi tormentor, Hellenreiner jumped over the barrier of the dock with a mighty leap and gave Beiglböck a terrible punch in the face while shouting, "This rascal has ruined my life." The presiding judge then sentenced Hellenreiner to 90 days in prison while he was still in court and ended the questioning. However, he was released on probation shortly afterwards. No further witnesses of the experiments were present, as Beiglböck had removed the names of the subjects on which he had conducted his experiments. This was in order to prevent the court from locating them in future. In addition, he also changed experimental data and clinical case descriptions. During the trial, Beiglböck insisted that the test subjects were volunteers. However, his lies did not help him escape justice. On the 20th of August, 1947, the US military court found Wilhelm Beiglböck guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity and sentenced him to 15 years imprisonment. However, his sentence was later reduced to 10 years, and in the end, he was released before Christmas in 1951. Soon after, the German Society of Internal Medicine campaigned for Beiglböck's rehabilitation. The experts claimed no deaths or long-term damage had occurred among the test subjects, and claimed that Beiglböck had acted with the best medical intentions. However, these opinions were based entirely on files submitted to the experts by Beiglböck's attorney, and none of the experts had seen any of the test subjects themselves. Because Beiglböck's license to practice medicine had not been revoked, he became a chief physician at the hospital of Buxtehude, where he worked between 1952 and 1963. Though for the rest of his life, Beiglböck tried to justify the crimes committed in Dachau, his dark past haunted him until his very end. Wilhelm Beiglböck was 58 years old when he was found dead in a stairwell on the 22nd of November, 1963. Circumstances of his death suggest suicide, but rumors of murder arose due to the threatening letters which he received prior to his death. The main heir of his fortune was Stille Hilfe, meaning silent help, an organization for arrested, condemned, and fugitive members of the SS. Even after his death, Beiglböck supporters continued to claim that the prisoners had volunteered for his experiments. During his funeral, a state physician representative said that Beiglböck had been innocent, and after the war he was caught up in a wheelwork of hatred that knew no justice. However, Beiglböck's victims would most certainly disagree. There were no tears shed for Wilhelm Beiglböck. Thanks for watching the World History channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.